Hello everyone, it's Merlin here, and today we are going to be having a Hunter-Hunter discussion. Now this particular discussion will be pertaining to the arc known as Greed Island. Now, there are a number of different opinions revolving around this arc. Some people really praise it, they think it's awesome, they think it has an incredible amount of strengths, and a lot of other people have mixed or less feelings about it. I am one of the few people that greatly dislikes the Greed Island arc. Now, there are a number of reasons for this. Now, before going into further detail, I will have to stress that I do not believe that Greed Island is a terrible arc overall. I do not believe that it is one of the worst arcs in shonen history or anything of that sort. Certainly nothing that extreme. There are certainly far worse arcs out there. However, in regards to HunterxHunter, in comparison to the previous arcs, Greed Island simply didn't meet the previous standards. And there are three primary reasons for this. Number 1, wasting time. Much of the premise of the Greed Island arc was very interesting. As we find out early on from Gon and Killua arriving on the island, we learn that there's an entire contest to get off the island based around how many cards you collect, and that many of the players, using their various Nen abilities, could manipulate the cards in various ways in order to eventually claim the prize and escape the island. And this led to a great deal of exposition early on and much throughout the arc revolving around all the different types of cards, the various rules surrounding the cards, different ways to use them, the value of different cards, and it really hinted that there would be a great deal more rules to accompany this. However, these rules ultimately meant nothing. With all the incredible amount of exposition revolving around the cards early on in the arc, ultimately, it didn't go anywhere. Most of the arc would end up pertaining to Gon and Killua learning how to improve their Nen abilities and increase their strength. The arc essentially became a training arc. Now, granted, this is necessary in a shonen fighting series. However, compared to previous other arcs, with the level of character dynamics and thematic exploration, this one simply didn't deliver. And the whole theme revolving around the cards ultimately proved to be essentially meaningless. Secondly, the villain. Compared to previous villains introduced and ones following this particular arc, the Bomber was quite simply lame. He was a very poorly developed and executed character overall, with weak motivations in contrast to other Hunter x Hunter villains. He just wasn't that interesting. He wasn't really that intimidating overall, and there wasn't a great deal of exposure to him. Thirdly, the final fights. As previous arcs and following arcs would demonstrate, Hunter x Hunter has some of the most interesting fights in all of shonen battle series. However, the final fights between Gon and Killua, and Bomber and his henchmen, well, left a great deal to be desired. The fights were short, unfulfilling, and rather uninteresting. They were completely lacking any sense of suspense, and despite all the deaths occurring in the arc, there never really seemed to be a great deal much at stake. And once again, this is primarily due to the lack of intimidation that the Bomber emanated. And finally, the initial concept of Greed Island was the mystery surrounding the pursuit of Gon's father, which is the overall primary plot that drives the series forward. However, when the arc is completed, it quickly becomes apparent that we don't learn a great deal more about Gon's father, only to reveal the location of Kite. Though one could argue that this was a piece of the puzzle in the lengthy adventure to find Gon's father, it was incredibly misleading and honestly somewhat disappointing, despite the awesomeness of Kite's character. Though I do believe that this arc does contain more cons than pros, there were a few things that it did do rather well. The most obvious is of course the fact that it improved Gon and Killua's skills, particularly with learning different Nen abilities, and made them a little more powerful to fight villains in later arcs. This was certainly necessary. However, the way it was executed was not in the most interesting fashion. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of this arc is that the dynamics of Hisoka are revealed in a whole new light. Whereas he was previously viewed as something of a complex villain, his abandoning of the Phantom Troop and his strange alliance with Gon and Killua added a whole new level of depth and mystery to the character, making the relationship between him and Gon all the more complex and possibly interesting for the future. In summation, though this arc did do a few things well, it was ultimately too long, not executed as properly as it could have been. Despite having a unique premise, the potential revolving around the concept of the card game was ultimately not used to its full potential, the fights were disappointing, and the villain was not particularly interesting. Thankfully, the arc following this was far superior. And those are my thoughts on Greed Island. Let me know what you guys think. This is Merlin, signing off again. Until next time, guys.